Yeah, man. So, listen, welcome, bro. Thank you for
having me.
coming on, man.
Yeah,
I'm super excited to actually, get this thing out there, to my clients, to the community.
yeah, for
Try to
sure.
bring more value to everybody that's out there, man. So, with no further ado, I just want to go ahead and introduce one of my very good friend, Danny. He's a home inspector with Home Team.
Home Team Inspection
Yeah,
Services,
yeah.
yeah.
And how long have you been there, man?
So I've owned the franchise for about 2 years now. The franchise has been around over 30.
Okay,
So
nice.
we've been around for a long time,
Yeah.
nationally recognized brand,
Okay.
over 200 locations throughout the country.
Okay.
So really, we've been in this market and we've got a ton of experience when it comes to inspecting.
Okay, awesome, awesome. All right, so for my first question, Danny, is, why is it a good idea to never ever skip a home inspection, man? I know I've seen situations where, people say, Jason, I want to save $500, I want to save $600.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's important to never skip like a home inspection?
Yeah, well, I guess for me,
Yeah.
and it's funny because we're coming off a market where people were waiving their home inspection contingencies left and right.
Okay.
I think it's a value proposition, right?
Okay.
So you're saving $500 now,
Mhm.
but you might be missing thousands of dollars in repairs.
That's
Or
true.
I guess one of the biggest things that we
Mhm.
cover with our home inspection reports in general is we give you an idea of what an investment, like what kind of investment you're getting into, right?
Mhm.
People are spending more money on their houses than they ever have in the past.
Okay.
But on top of that, after the negotiating report, it gives a way for you as a realtor to provide
Mhm.
value to your clients too, because it
Sure.
allows you to really negotiate
Mhm.
prices, asking for credits.
Mhm.
So maybe you spent $500 on a
Mhm.
home inspection,
Sure.
but you might have gotten over $1,000 in credits.
Mhm.
There's a way to kind of approach it where the home inspection really is a tool
Mhm.
that a buyer can leverage to really build off of the given condition of the house. We also uncovered things that people aren't naturally trained. Not everybody's a contractor, so people aren't
That
going
is
to
true.
naturally identify
true.
a lot of these problems.
That is true.
So having a trained eye and an unbiased opinion is really
Mhm.
valuable, I think, in the transaction.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree. I agree. Now, and I guess you answer my second question, like why should we do it?
Right.
So that get answered too. Good, good. And what makes a good home inspector?
So, I mean, a good home inspector can come in various different ways. I think it's important to find and converse with your home inspector prior to the inspection, just to really build trust and rapport. Really, I really value that personally when it comes to me doing home inspections.
That is true.
I want the client to.
And not to cut you, man.
Yeah,
I see that with just the way you, that's kind of one of the reason why I wanted to have you on, because I see you everywhere, man.
Yeah.
You're everywhere.
Yeah.
You're everywhere.
I mean,
You're-
it's good.
You're
to
in the
stay-
face. You're doing a lot of networking. You're you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're at all the events despite everything else that you're doing with with being busy and still being able to do that, man. Like, I really value that.
Yeah, I think it's
And
important.
I think a lot of other agents, whenever they're doing networking events and they see you, they appreciate that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I always try to make a priority to, really service my agents as well as my clients. Really, like I said, building trust and rapport. A lot of times the client's not going to have the opportunity to really get on the phone and talk
Mhm.
for any type of, period of time for us to really build the relationship. So I really value,
Mhm.
at least when I'm on the home inspection, really building that relationship with them.
Mhm.
So it's stuff that I would look for if I was looking for a home inspector.
Mhm.
First thing would be making sure that they're properly qualified.
Okay.
Making sure that they're licensed, seeing what kind of certifications they have, seeing what
Mhm.
kind of services they offer.
Okay. Services.
I would definitely identify those as big ones, but also look at Google reviews. That's another way to go about it.
Okay.
And also call them and have a conversation with them.
Right.
Because chances are, if you can call the inspector and you have a conversation with the person and they sound genuine, it helps. I
Mhm.
think it really does, because you're putting your trust in this person
Mhm.
and you really are leveraging their skill set to identify any potential issues in
Yeah.
probably the largest investment most people are
Largest
going to make in their
investment you're
life.
gonna make in your life, and you already agreed, man. And sometimes, I say that to clients too as a realtor. this is not about, being a realtor today. This is all about the home inspector, my guy Danny. But, it's true. That's one thing I always stress to clients. You're purchasing one of the biggest assets of your life, and it's super, super important, man, that you try not to skip any steps or cut any corners because, once you buy the house, once you close, that's it.
Yeah,
That's
100%.
it. So
100%.
very important, very important.
And we're seeing that too. I've heard plenty of horror stories where, unfortunately, the home inspection is skipped. Right?
Yeah.
They're saving money at the time, but they're spending thousands of dollars down the line because
down the line.
things are beginning to uncover as you live in the
Yes.
house for an extended period of
Yes.
time.
Yes.
You have such a limited scope between your showings and even your final walkthrough. You're only really exposed to the house for a couple hours at most.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things you're not going to really uncover until you live in them, or
Yeah.
you're trained to look for them.
That's absolutely.
And so,
And this is going to jump to our next question, actually, Danny. This is a big one because we're talking about expenses and things that happens down the line, right?
yes.
And costly things, right? So life expectancy when it comes to like boilers, roof, plumbing. These are big ticket items when when you're buying a home, and these are like I said, big ticket items. It's going to cost you a lot of money down the road. What are like some of the life expectancy of some of these big ticket items like the boilers and the roof and I guess like plumbings, man, and things like that?
Yeah. So
Electricals,
the life
all that stuff.
expectancy of a lot of the mechanicals typically tends to gravitate around 20 years, is what I see.
20 years?
Is usually what I tell my clients. So like asphalt shingle roofs, typically on average are about 20 years. Furnaces,
Roof, okay.
water heaters, those are typically things about 20 years.
Okay.
Like there's some nuance to that.
Mhm.
For example, I've seen boilers that last a lot longer, but they're also constantly being serviced.
Yeah,
And then on top of that,
that is true.
with older mechanicals, you have to also consider energy efficiency.
Okay.
So that like what
Mm.
like for example, a boiler might be 20 years old and work fine,
Mhm.
but is the energy that you're using to power the boiler
Mhm.
worth it to you? You might be spending more money in
Mhm.
energy costs, and you might save that over the course of the year. It's getting something more efficient.
True.
So it's really on a case by case basis
Mhm.
on what the home buyer is really looking for,
Okay.
and really what's important to them.
Mhm.
Me as a home inspector, really what I'm looking for is functionality. I'm
Okay.
looking for,
Sure.
does this work? Are there any large issues?
Mhm.
I've seen furnaces. Actually, I did an inspection about
Mhm.
2 weeks ago
Mhm.
where the furnace was actively it had a leak in it
Okay.
from an exhaust line.
Mhm.
So the exhaust wasn't properly sealed at where the PVC
Mhm.
meets. Water was getting in.
Mhm.
There's a seal there. It's that purple material that you see that's there. That
Okay.
seals PVC pipe together.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
I know
so
what you're
that-
talking
so
about.
that
Yes,
seal
yes,
happened-
yes. I know what you're saying.
In this case, for
Yeah.
the furnace, it happened to be used as an exhaust.
Okay.
It wasn't sealed properly. Water was getting in, and it was actively dripping in the furnace. So
Oh.
it was never noticed. So over the course of I'm not sure how much time, I would assume months at this point,
Right.
it actually rusted out
Mhm.
the encasement of the furnace and all the
Oh.
way down to where the fan is.
So that are you saying that purple, whatever thing that is,
Yeah.
it will cause some type of rust?
No. So what
Okay.
it's causing is it's causing a moisture penetration. So water's dripping into the flue, and then
Okay.
the water's trickling down and into the internal components of the furnace.
Gotcha.
So everything was rusting out, essentially.
Wow.
And so that whole furnace happened to be. I recommended having an HVAC specialist look at it, but my guess would be that it would probably have to be replaced.
Sooner than later.
Yeah,
Wow.
and that's
Wow.
a
I learned
furnace
something.
that's a furnace that's 10 years old. That's
Wow.
not even one that's like near the end of
The
its
older
life.
one, right.
So
Mhm.
really goes to kind of
Interesting.
show that it's important to get those things so that we can look out for those sorts of
Mhm.
things. Most walkthroughs you're going through, I'm sure as an agent, you're not popping open the panel of the furnace to look.
That's not my job. That's not my job. I stay out of that. Danny, listen. My client like this house. Come and do. Can do. Give me an extra pair of eyes.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So
Definitely.
definitely. Good
Um,
stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, we see a lot of stuff like that all the time.
So super cool, man. Now, when it comes to like maintaining, what are some things that we should be maintaining? I know, let's say it was a vacant house, for example, right? And I've worked in vacant properties where they say, Jason, I want you to go out and winterize this home. This is what I used to do, like property preservation work, right? They want you to go out and winterize this property, right? What are some like, you know, for a homeowner that actually lives in the home, what are some things that they should be, you know, looking forward to annually maintain, monthly, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah. So winterization is kind of a completely different thing because usually with winterization, you're cutting off parts of the electrical, you're putting antifreeze in the plumbing because there's not going to be like
Vacant,
the water. Yeah,
vacant,
exactly. The water's not going to be
vacant
moved. But I guess to kind of caveat off of that with what you were saying in regards to general maintenance, some of the biggest maintenance items that I see that get overlooked are roof maintenance is a big one.
Okay.
So, you know, a lot of people have nail popping on their roofs that they just kind of forego. Issue with nail popping.
Nails popping out.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like, so what happens is the sun hits the roof and it
Okay.
heats the nail that's where, like, that's planting the shingle into the wood, into the plywood, the sheathing underneath.
I see.
Wow. The sun hits it, heats it up, it causes that expansion, and then when it cools, it contracts, and that expansion and contraction can sometimes cause the nails to come out of the roof. It's called a nail pop.
Nail pop.
So
Okay.
what happens with those nail pops is that it's technically a moisture penetration because wind-driven rain can get under there. Over time, if the wind's blowing just right, it can blow the shingle off of the roof.
That's why that happens.
But it also breaks the seal. There's a seal there. Those nails are sealed to protect water from entering the roof as well, and now that's exposed. So over time, if it's not dealt with, that can be a situation where it's. I want to caveat with saying nail pops are probably the most common roof issue that I see.
It is because a lot of times, not to cut you, you know, you're walking past a home, you see all these shingles all over the place. Like, how did it?
It's
how
almost
did it
one
happen?
of the first things I see.
So you're saying that, in other words, and make sure I just want to make sure I get it so I can explain it nicely to my clients. You know, the truth is, so in the different seasons, rain, sun, whatever the case may be, the nail starts to pop up for
Yeah, so it's not even
what
just
reasons?
different seasons. It's usually just because the sun is hitting the roof and it makes it hotter.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, expansion.
Yeah,
Okay.
that expansion
Okay.
of the metal because it's heating the metal.
How often does this happen? Like,
It's pretty common.
Really?
I see it in over 50% of the houses I inspect.
okay.
Really, the only time I don't see it is if a house is like the roof is pretty much in new condition. I mean, sometimes you get really well maintained roofs, but a lot of people, it's not the first thing they think of when they think of maintaining the house, right? I think some of the first things people think of are keeping the gutters clean, which
Which is good. Which is good.
Yeah.
You know, definitely want to keep the gutters clean.
Yeah, like, but
Drains.
and it's also a huge that's a cheap maintenance thing to do.
Okay.
A really cheap maintenance thing to do, but it also goes a long way because it takes the water away from the house. So making sure that those gutters aren't clogged is a big deal. But a lot of people overlook doing things like, okay, let me make sure that my roof is properly sealed so that moisture's not, you know, getting down into the sheathing. And there's a number of things that could happen with wet sheathing. You know, it can wood rot is by far the most common.
It goes
thing.
down. It goes down.
Exactly.
It goes down.
And it could also become a mold issue potentially as well.
Right into the house.
Yep.
Right into the house.
Yep.
Right in whatever, depending on where you are in the house.
Yeah, it's usually in the attic.
Exactly. It comes right in.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right. And did we cover how often we need to, like, you know, do these repairs? Let's say.
Yeah. So with nail pops,
Like these, yeah.
you know, it's not the most cost efficient thing to do to have a roofer come out for just one nail pop. Probably. I mean, I guess speaking more candidly, you could wait a little bit, but I wouldn't wait a long time. Mainly due to the reason of
Every year, would you say with a year?
Yeah, I mean,
Once a
you can
year?
have a roofer. I think it's a good idea to have a roofer check out your roof about once a year.
About once a
Gutters,
year.
the same thing, about
Same
once
thing.
a year. A lot of these companies do the same things. Like
Yeah.
a lot of these companies happen to do roof and gutters,
Right.
so they're covering all of those components
Yeah.
as is. So they're doing things like once a year cleaning out the gutters, checking and evaluating the roof to make sure that it's watertight.
Nice.
You know, HVAC is definitely something I always recommend getting serviced at least
Once a year.
At
Okay.
least.
What about the boiler? How often are we servicing the boiler?
Yeah, so that would go under the HVAC heat.
Okay, HVAC.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Nice.
under that umbrella of HVAC, I would definitely say having it inspected once a year is a good idea.
Gotcha. Here's another question for you now, Danny. What's one of the craziest home inspections that you have been on, man? You're like, man, this is you know, what kind of horror stories you could tell us today?
I've got so many. Okay, so there was one house that I did over the summer.
Yeah.
It took me maybe, I want to say 30 to 45 minutes just to find the electrical panel. So I walk in the house and I saw where the electrical meter was outside, and typically it's in the basement.
Okay.
This basement happened to be finished.
Okay.
They built the electric, so they had the electrical panel behind some sort of like drywall cutout, but then they put kitchen cabinetry over that.
Oh.
So I had to remove all the shelves.
Wow.
Remove the back of the cabinet, and then there was the cutout. That was tough because that one took me a really long time.
So you had to literally take down the kitchen cabinets?
I didn't remove the cabinet off the wall. I had to remove. So I opened the door and I removed all the internal components.
Oh wow.
So all the shelves out, and then I saw that there was like a small like little latch thing you pull towards you. It takes out the back of the cabinet for this particular portion that they cut out. And then there was a piece of drywall.
This was in the basement?
This was in the basement. Yeah. Which was illegal anyway because it was a kitchen in the basement, which you very rarely see. Yeah. Usually if you see a kitchen in the basement, it's typically grandfathered in from some older permitting. You don't see it too often these days.
Yeah.
So normally whenever I see a kitchen in the basement, it immediately starts to draw a few red flags for me.
Yeah.
And it just, for me at least, it's an indication of, okay, I need to look into this further.
So the truth is though, in the Bronx, or let's say the city, you know, you see it, trust me, you see a lot of, I do a lot of real estate in the Bronx.
Yep.
And, you know, down there, man, trust me, you see kitchens all over the place.
Yeah.
You go into the basement, you have a kitchen, you have a half garage, and it's nothing, you know, people do it, and, you know, it helps to supplement the income for the property. You know, sometimes I just sold this house, it had the basement ceiling was like this high, literally.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And they had a nice little kitchen down there, they had, you know, they didn't have a stove. Mm-hmm. But you know how sometimes you have these little cooktops or whatever the case may be in the basements.
Right.
But it's pretty cool. But you know,
I think
in New York City, I think it's not okay, but people still do it.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is that's why it's important to have like a team. Really, when you're doing real estate, it's really important to have a team of agents and lawyers and title companies and home inspectors, really a group of people to rely on to really provide that information, because you know the value add that you brought there was you probably provided them a CO, and you probably ensured that, hey, this is legal to be there, because if it wasn't and the sale was going to occur, the local municipality, in this case the Bronx, would have probably shut it down. They would have said, hey, we don't have a CO for this bathroom, you guys are reporting the bathroom on the listing, and usually that's something.
No, you can't report it on the listing. You can never report it on the listing.
Oh, okay.
But what I'm saying is, a lot of times, I want to say maybe 80% of the homes in the Bronx, people rent them out in the basements.
Are they illegal kitchens?
No.
I've seen stuff like that too.
They're not legal at all, dude. But 80% of the time, you know, 80% of the houses in the city.
I've seen that too.
Because, you know, the prices are homes, and people, you know, you know, in New York City, everything is so bundled up. And so people take advantage of every single corners that they can take advantage of. So,
but what the issue with that, the reason why there is permitting for these things is for safety purposes.
You should have permits. That's the right thing to do.
Exactly.
That's the 100%.
Exactly. And I've done several houses in the Bronx that have had them. The issue with those kitchens that I tend to see almost immediately is improper ventilation. So obviously that creates a big hazard.
Yes, yeah,
right?
that is true.
You don't have a way to ventilate the smoke, and also there's certain areas of the house that really aren't built to have a stove there. I've seen stoves.
You should. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. But what they also do is, first, it can't be gas. It has to be electric. And if it's electric, the best thing to do is kind of have like a cooktop.
A cooktop is a little bit, there's a little more nuance.
You understand? It's a little bit better.
But I've also seen, like, for example, electric stoves under, like, staircases, which is not adequate clearance to have stoves.
I'm telling you, you've seen some stuff. You've seen some stuff there. You're like, man, how did you do that? Why did you do that? Like, trust me, I've seen some stuff.
Yeah. And it's just, at that point, it's just important, because I've heard situations like that. I actually had an instance like that a few months ago where the client basically was like, oh, it's okay, the seller's gonna remove the stove and we'll put it back, right? Because for the loan to go through, which is it's already, we're delving into some gray. Because I wouldn't recommend that. But the thing that I was consulting my clients with is you need to be aware of the clearances. I don't know what decision they ended up making at the end of the day. That's not my choice for them to make. They're going to be the eventual homeowners.
Right.
But if they have inadequate clearance, it's a fire hazard. If you're frying something, for example, and it's popping up and it's just pooling on the bottom of the steps that are way under clearance, that could be a fire hazard. That could be a number of issues.
Those are safety tips, which is what was going to be one of my next things. You know, what are some like safety tips, man? We can continue to talk about these basements and you know, proper ventilations and you know, all that stuff. Like, what are some safety tips?
Yeah, I mean, ventilation covers more than just the basement. Like in this case, we're talking about ventilation for, you know, a stove, right? But there's ventilation throughout the house that is like important. Ventilation in the attic is another good example. If the attic ventilation is inadequate, it can get very humid, which can allow for mold to grow there. That's a lot of times why when you're walking into a house, you see those vents on the sides of it. Those are called gable vents. They also have.
Which one is it? Gable vents?
Gable, yeah.
Oh, nice.
So those are the ones where if you're looking at a gable roof like that, they have that kind of little window there.
Gables on the roof. Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, really?
So that provides ventilation to the attic. Another common one you see is typically on the ridge, which would be right on the top where those two ends meet, like the two sides meet. They'll put a vent there. And then the third vent that we most commonly see is the soffit, which would be on the bottom of the ridge over here.
Okay.
All of those provide ventilation and airflow into the attic so that it doesn't get excessively hot or excessively cold, or you don't want it airtight. It could also, an airtight attic can also cause negative pressure into the house, which can cause certain issues with that as well.
Attic.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you say negative pressure, I'm sure a lot of people, those are inspect the terms, you know what I mean? So for the average person that's listening, man, what do you mean like negative pressure? So just so we can, you know, they can, you know, fully digest the information.
Yeah.
What do you mean like negative pressure?
Yeah, so pressurization in a house is really like any sort of like, I guess, push or pull on certain things. So for example, houses with pressure issues can have things like door slamming kind of occur. Pressurization is important for things like air pressure is important for things like HVAC systems. A common issue that I saw last week, actually when I was doing an inspection, was we had a boiler and the room didn't have louvered doors. It had a really small window. The doors looked like they were closed all the time. And so it was causing the boiler to short cycles, what we call it, which means turn on briefly, get up to temperature, and immediately shut off.
Okay.
So it's an issue because it's bad for the mechanical to start up and shut down. It'd be like the same thing of like turning your car off and on every time you got to a red light, for example.
I see.
Or and it's also inefficient fuel wise. You're using a lot more fuel.
That is true.
Because it's cutting off and turning on and cutting off and turning on. So it didn't maintain the pressure. It just got, or I'm sorry, the temperature. It would just get up to the temperature and immediately cut off. And that was due to a pressurization issue because the heat exchanger for the boiler wasn't getting enough oxygen to keep the fire going.
I see.
So pressurization has a lot of impact throughout the house, in my opinion.
Yes, absolutely. I can see that. So, like you said, it also helps you to save money, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So, and that's another thing. So I have two more questions.
Sure.
All right. So one is, you know, how can we help the homeowner? And I guess for the buyer it's a little bit different, but I like to be able to help the person that already have the home, how we can help them to save money, right? That's one question, and then I'm going to talk about, you know, some of the things that you just mentioned in regards to what to look for in a good home inspector, and then why should we hire you?
Sure,
you know
sure.
What I mean? Like
so
for the average, see what
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, all right, we'll start with the first question.
Safety, yeah.
The first question was home saving tip.
Yeah, savings. Right?
So, the biggest, I think, home saving tip to give a current homeowner would be to properly maintain the maintenance of their house.
Okay.
When you kind of let things fall to the side and you don't really maintain the house well, those expenses tend to add up really quickly.
Okay.
I like to use the analogy of like owning a car, for example. While paying for an oil change can be considered expensive at the time of it, if I don't pay for an oil change and my engine crashes as a result, and now I have to either buy a new car or get engine replacement. That can be a lot more costly
Yep.
than paying the small amounts over a period of time. I like so for me that's a really good analogy. So doing things like not maintaining your gutters, letting them get clogged up, right? Then you're gonna have standing water in your gutters in New York, especially in a day like today. It's gonna freeze, and then you have an ice damming effect. Not maintaining those nail pops on your roof, you can cause greater damage over time by not fixing them.
Right.
Not getting your HVAC serviced, and then as a result, your heat exchanger cracks, and so you have to replace. So rather than monitoring it, and maybe you do have to replace parts of these things over time, but you're handling it over a course of time rather than a large lump sum at one point.
At one point in time, yeah.
So
that's one way to save money.
Definitely.
Do it regularly. Don't wait for 2, 3, 4, 5 years before you check the roofs, right? You want to check it every so often, maybe once a year at least, to kind of see what's going on with it. If there's something going on with it, you want to take care of it right away. Am I correct?
Yeah.
You
I
don't
think
want to just wait until it becomes much of a bigger problem.
Yeah.
So that's one way to save money up front.
Another big one would be making sure that your house is properly insulated. I think
Okay.
that's a really big one.
Installation, yes, because
so-
if it's not insulated, you have all this heat coming back out, right?
Exactly. Or cooling. It
Or
works
cooling,
both, it works
or
both
cooling,
ways.
heating
It
or
works both
cooling,
ways.
yep.
But there's plenty of houses that I go to that the insulation is not adequate, or the insulation happens to be falling, or the door seals and the windows are very old. And those are houses that I keep an eye out for, because that means that their energy costs are going to be higher than average. And so that's something good to kind of bear in mind, right? Like, yes, it may cost money to replace certain things, but think about that compounding monthly increase in cost that you're having to spend because the house isn't properly insulated.
And the funny thing about this too, when you say installation, I've had, situations where somebody would say to me, look, I haven't really been even using my heat, but my heat bill is so high. Or same thing with the cooling. My electrical bill is so high, but I think it's a nice house, but it still comes back down to what? The installation. If it's not properly installated, you're gonna constantly find your bills inflating for whatever reason.
Yeah. And I mean, regardless whether it may or may not be true if they're using it a lot or not, but if they're bringing a house up to temperature and it's not properly insulated,
Or keep
entropy is gonna just happen, and you're gonna
right.
end up either losing that cold air that you're trying to keep in, or losing that hot air that you're trying to keep in.
Or you gotta run it more often
Exactly.
or longer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that goes for any mechanical, really. Like, if you think
100%.
about it. So
Anything else?
we were talking about, you had two
Costs, like savings.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
so
we
the
kinda
other,
covered
okay,
all
good.
that. Yeah.
So the other thing for me, man, is just wanted to go over some of the things that to look for when you're searching for a good home inspector, like my guy Danny here. All right, you definitely want to check their qualifications, just making sure that they're well qualified. You want to check their Google reviews, see what kind of services they have to offer. And then you definitely want to call them and try to build some type of rapport with them, just to make sure that this person is on your side. Because obviously you do know that some home inspectors, they just they're out.
Yeah, and I mean certain clients have different needs. So
Right.
I know plenty of home inspectors that really view it like, hey, I'm gonna do a report. That's my job. My job is to go in, report my findings, and hand you the report and leave.
Right.
And some inspectors are like that, and they do well for themselves. But I think they adhere to a certain type of clientele.
Right.
And there's other clients that tend to want a more service-based type of experience, where they really want to be able to communicate with their inspector. They want their inspector to be able to answer the
Right.
phone after the inspection and answer some questions that
Which
they
is very
have.
important.
So it's really important to communicate with the inspector prior to it, to kind of figure out what kind of service you're going to get as well, right? You don't want to just hire somebody because you saw good reviews on them, right? Maybe they do great at their report writing, but if you had a question, you can't reach that person.
Right.
And really building that relationship is important. We've had that in the past. I've had several clients that you and I have both worked with in the past that still communicate to me to this day and ask me
100%.
questions about the house.
100%.
And
100%.
I really focus on, me personally as an inspector, I think that the relationship is important with your client.
That's why you're here, brother. And that's why you're here, man. I'm telling you, that's why you're here. I told you before, when you come into this business, man, and you find, good people and people that don't just wants to be here and wants to be here for a while. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You have people, they just want to be here, and you know they don't really care. You can feel that, and which is why I wanted to bring you on today, man.
Yeah,
So
I
thank you
appreciate
for coming
it.
in, bro.
I appreciate it,
And
man.
I look forward
Yeah,
to
thanks so
having
much.
a great 2023 with you.
Definitely.
Alrighty.
Yep.
So
Much
Dave,
success.
yeah. Do you want to say anything to these guys, man?
No, just thank you so much for listening. If you guys, have any other further questions, feel free to look me up.